The guild hall on Kara's 9 station buzzed with the usual evening crowd of mercenaries and traders. But the back corner booth held an unusual silence that seemed to push against the surrounding noise like a physical force. Cax there sat with his forearms folded across his scaled chest. His cybernetic eye worried softly as it focused on the young faces gathered around his table. The recruits were fresh and eager, their eyes bright with the kind of confidence that came from never having truly faced death. There was a Droxian, with purple skin still unmarked by battle scars, a pair of Mithrian twins whose antennae quivered with excitement, and a young Corvin who kept flexing his claws as if imagining his first real fight. Commander Caxthur. The Droxian spoke up, his voice carrying that annoying pitch of youthful certainty. Everyone says you have fought on over 100 battlefields across 40 systems. Caxthur's scarred face remained impassive as he nodded. Once they say, you have never lost a contract. One of the Mithrian twins added, they say, you have killed warriors from every major species in the galaxy. The other twin continued. The Corvin leaned forward, his predatory eyes gleaming in the dim light of the booth. So tell us, Commander, which species is the most dangerous? The Varaxian Death Commandos? The Kelthoran Berserkers? The Zinthhive Warriors? Caxthur was quiet for a long moment, his 3 natural eyes distant, while his cybernetic one continued its soft mechanical worry. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower and rougher than usual. I have fought them all, he said slowly, and yes, each one is formidable in their own way. He paused and reached for his drink, a thick blue liquid that glowed faintly in the glass. But you asked me which species is the most dangerous. The recruits leaned in closer, hungry for wisdom from a living leg. And Caxthur set down his glass with a solid thunk against the metal table. The humans, he said simply. The Droxian snorted, and the Corvin's face twisted into something like disappointment. Humans. The Droxian said with obvious disbelief, but Commander, humans are barely 100 cycles into the galactic community, and they are not particularly strong or fast, and their technology is average at best. They die easily. One of the Mithrian twins added, they have soft skin and weak bones. The other agreed. The Corvin nodded along with this assessment, clearly expecting Caxthur to be joking or testing them somehow. Caxthur's expression did not change, and his voice remained level and serious. Everything you just said is true, he acknowledged, and that is precisely why you should fear them. He leaned back in his seat, and his cybernetic eye dimmed slightly as if he were looking into the past rather than at the confused young faces before him. 15 standard years ago, I believed exactly what you believe now, and I accepted a contract that I thought would be simple and profitable and quick. The recruits settled into silence, sensing that the old commander was about to share something important. My company at the time numbered 500 strong, Caxthur continued. We were well equipped and experienced, and we had just come off 3 successful campaigns in the Outer Rim. His lower left hand traced an old scar that ran along his jaw. The Velkin Consortium approached me with what seemed like an ideal contract, and the pay was exceptional, and the target appeared soft humans. The Corvan asked quietly. Caxthur nodded. 3 disputed mining colonies in what the humans called the New Providence sector, and the Velkins claimed the humans had moved into territory that was rightfully theirs under ancient settlement laws. He gestured with one hand in a dismissive wave. The details of the legal dispute meant nothing to me, and I was a mercenary, and the Velkins were paying, and that was all that mattered. What went wrong? The Droxian asked, his earlier smugness completely gone. Everything, Caxthur said flatly. And nothing, and it depends on how you look at it. He took another drink, and when he set the glass down again, his hands were perfectly steady despite the dark memories clearly playing behind his eyes. The Velkins provided us with intelligence reports on the human colonies, and according to their data, each world had minimal defensive capabilities, and perhaps a few hundred lightly armed colonists, and maybe a small security force with outdated weapons. The Mithrian twins exchanged glances. That does sound like an easy contract. One venture-ed Caxthur. S. laugh was bitter and short. That is what I thought, and my entire command staff agreed. And we planned a simple 3-phase operation and hit each colony in sequence and force the humans to abandon their claims and collect our payment, his cybernetic. I brightened again as he focused on each recruit in turn. We jumped into the New Providence system with overwhelming force, and my fleet consisted of 12 warships and enough firepower to crack the moon if needed for colonists. That would be terrifying. The Corvin observed. It should have been, Caxter agreed. And when we made orbit around New Providence Prime and transmitted our demands, I expected panic and immediate surrender, or perhaps desperate pleas for negotiation. He paused, and his expression grew darker instead. The human colonial administrator appeared on our view screen, and she was calm, and she looked tired more than afraid, and she told us we had one chance to withdraw and face no consequences. The Droxian couldn't help but laugh. She threatened you, Caxter said sharply, cutting off the laughter. She did not threaten, and she warned, and there's a difference, and I was too foolish and too arrogant to understand that difference. He stood up slowly, his full height impressive, even in the low-ceilinged guild hall. I told her we would begin orbital bombardment in one standard hour if the colonists did not begin evacuation, and she just nodded and said something. I will never forget. The recruits waited in tense silence. Sexithora's voice dropped to barely above a whisper as he repeated the words she said. You are making a choice you cannot unmake, and I hope you understand what you are bringing down on yourselves. He sat back down heavily. Then she terminated the connection, and I laughed and my officers laughed, and we began our assault. The old mercenary's face was grim as he continued. The initial attack went exactly as planned. We deployed drop troops to the main settlement, and our fighters strafed the defensive positions, and within 6 hours, we had full control of the colony. So you won, the Corvin said. Confused about where this story was going, Caxter's 3 natural eyes all fixed on the young warrior. No, he said quietly. We had just signed our own death warrants, and we simply did not know it yet. The temperature in the booth seemed to drop several degrees. The human defenders retreated in good order, and there was no panic and no chaos, and they fell back to secondary positions, and then to tertiary positions, and then they simply disappeared into the wilderness beyond the colony proper, one of his hands clenched into a fist. We captured some civilians who had not evacuated, and I remember thinking how strange they were. They were not afraid, and not the way prey species should be when predators have them cornered. His voice grew distant. There was a young human girl, maybe 8 or 9 in their years, and she looked up at me with these calm brown eyes, and she said, You should not have done this. Caxter shook his head slowly. I dismissed it as bravado or ignorance, and I posted guards and established a perimeter, and sent reports back to the Velkans that Phase 1 was complete. He looked at each of the recruits. I had 3 days of thinking I had one. Then what happened? The Droxian whispered. Sather's expression became something the recruits had never seen on the old warrior's face before. It was fear. The 3 days following the initial occupation of New Providence Prime felt like victory to Caxter and his mercenary company. They established defensive positions around the main settlement, and the mining facilities were under their control. And the few remaining human civilians were confined to a designated area under guard. Cax there stood in what had been the colonial administrator's office, reviewing tactical displays and resource inventories. His second-in-command, a massive Roxian named Thork, entered with a datapad in his clawed hands. Commander, the perimeter sensors are showing some unusual readings in the forest sectors, Thork reported in his rumbling bass voice. Caxter barely looked up from his work to find unusual movement patterns that could be wildlife or could be the retreating defenders regrouping, Thork explained. But they are staying well beyond weapons range and not making any aggressive moves, probably just watching us and waiting to see if we actually leave, Caxter said dismissively. Post additional sentries, but do not waste resources chasing ghosts through the woods. Thork nodded and left to carry out the orders. Command center was quiet except for the soft beeping of monitors and the occasional communication from patrol units. Everything seemed to be proceeding exactly according to plan. Caxter allowed himself a moment of satisfaction as he calculated the bonus payment they would receive for completing all 3 colony operations ahead of schedule. On the second day, his communications officer, a Droxian named Keelix, approached with a concerned expression. Commander, we are receiving some strange signal traffic, Keelix said hesitantly. Strange how? Caxter asked. Encrypted transmissions bouncing through? The system, indefinitely human protocols, but much more sophisticated than anything the colonists should have. Kellex explained. The volume is increasing. Caxter felt the first small stirring of unease in his gut. Can you decrypt them? Kellex's skin flushed purple with embarrassment. No, Commander, and these are military-grade encryptions. And well, beyond colonial-level security, show me the source points. Caxter ordered. The tactical display lit up with dozens of transmission origin points scattered throughout. The system and most were coming from the outer planets, and some from the asteroid belt, and a few from deep space. Too many for a simple Colonial Defense Force. Send a priority message to the Vulcans, Caxter said, his voice tight. Ask them if they failed to mention any human military presence in this sector. The response from the Vulcan Consortium came 6 hours later, and it was evasive and full of bureaucratic language that essentially said they had provided all relevant intelligence sector. Read it 3 times, and his unease growing into genuine concern. He called a meeting with his senior officers in the secured command room. Something is wrong, he told them bluntly. The intelligence we received does not match what we are seeing. Thork crossed his arms. The humans ran, and we control the colony and what else matters. The way they ran matters, Caxter said, pulling up footage from the initial assault. Watch this. The recording showed human defenders falling back under fire, but there was no panic and no abandonment of wounded, and every retreat was covered by supporting fire, and equipment was either taken or destroyed rather than captured. That is professional military behavior. Observed his tactical officer, a Methrian named Seeks, not civilian militia exactly. Caxter agreed. And now we have military-grade communications traffic filling the system, and the Vulcans are being deliberately vague in their responses. Think we've walked into something bigger than a colonial dispute? Thork asked before Caxter could answer. Alarms began blaring throughout the command. Center Kellex's voice cut through the chaos. Commander. Multiple jump signatures detected at the system's edge, and reading 12 contacts, and make that 15 and 20 in contacts are still emerging. From jump space, Caxter rushed to the tactical display and watched with growing horror as more and more ships appeared on the sensors. These were not colonial defense vessels. These were warships and proper military-grade vessels with armor and weapons and electronic warfare capabilities that made his own fleet look like toys. Hail them, he ordered, his voice steady despite the ice spreading through his veins. Main view screen flickered to life and showed the bridge of a human warship, though. Officer who appeared wore a dark blue uniform with rank insignia that Caxter did not recognize, but clearly indicated high command. The human was male and middle-aged with gray at his temples and eyes that held no warmth whatsoever. Attention, mercenary forces, the human officer said in perfectly clear Galactic standard. His voice flat and professional. You are in violation of Terran Colonial Protection Treaty, Article 7, Section 3, and you have attacked civilian populations under Earth Alliance protection. Caxter felt his blood turn cold. The Vulcans had not mentioned any treaties. This is Commander Caxter of the Free Mercenary Company Talon Strike, he responded, trying to maintain his composure. We are operating under legal contract with the Vulcan Consortium regarding disputed territorial claims. The human officer's expression did not change. The Vulcan Consortium has no legitimate claim to this system under any recognized interstellar law, and you were hired to attack protected civilians, and the Vulcans knowingly withheld treaty information from you. We can withdraw immediately, Caxter offered, already calculating retreat vectors. This was a misunderstanding, no? The human officer said simply. It was not a misunderstanding, and you had warnings, and you chose to ignore them, and you chose to attack civilians, and you chose to occupy their homes. The view screen split to show multiple human warships moving into attack formations with a precision that spoke of countless hours of coordinated training. You have one opportunity to surrender, the human officer continued. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded, and you will be treated according to interstellar law. Caxter looked at his tactical display as, 12 ships, against what was now showing as 37 human warships. The smart choice was obvious, but pride and arrogance and years of undefeated campaigns made him hesitate. And if we refuse? He asked. The human officer's eyes somehow became even colder. Then you will learn why humanity does not negotiate. With those who threaten our families, the screen went dark, Commander. Thork looked at him, expectant. Lixicar's mind raced through options. They could not win a direct fight. They could try to scatter and run. Some ships might escape if they broke. Formation and jump to different systems. All ships, prepare for emergency jump, he ordered. Scatter pattern Omega and rendezvous at the backup coordinates, sir. What about our ground forces? Seeks Skadkaxer hesitated for only a second. They will have to surrender, and we cannot extract them. In time, it was a cold calculation, but it was also survival. Execute now. He commanded his fleet began emergency jump procedures and drives spinning up and navigation computers. Plotting random vectors, the human fleet did not fire immediately, and did not rush to intercept. They simply adjusted their formations with calm efficiency. Sether watched his tactical display as his ships began jumping out of the System 3. Ships made it successfully, and then a fourth. Then the humans opened fire. It was not the wild barrage he expected. Human warships selected a specific target and fired with surgical precision. Caxter S. Flagship shuddered as impacts struck their aft shields. Jump drive is charging. His navigator reported, voice strained. 30 seconds, another impact, and this one harder. Shields dropped to 40%. 20 seconds, the ship next to them. The heavy cruiser, Vengeance's Call, exploded in a brilliant flash as human missiles overwhelmed its defenses. 10 seconds. Caxter gripped his command chair as more impacts hammered their shields. The ship lurched violently to starboard. Jump now. He shouted. Reality twisted, and the stars stretched, and they were falling through jump space. They emerged 3 systems away. Caxter immediately ordered a damage report and a count of survivors 7. Ships had escaped, 5 had been destroyed. His ground forces, nearly 200 mercenaries, were captured or dead in less than 10 minutes. The humans had cut his company's strength by more than half, and Caxter realized with growing dread that this was not the end. Humans had not been trying to destroy his fleet. They had been sending a message as his crew worked frantically on repairs. Caxter pulled up everything he could find on human military doctrine. He read in the following hours made him understand the terrible mistake he had made. Humans had concepts like proportional response and rules of engagement and limited warfare, but they also had other concepts: total war, scorched earth, no quarter. The humans had been holding back in most of their conflicts with other species, but Caxter had not faced their military in a border dispute or a resource conflict here. Had attacked their civilians, he had threatened their families, and now he was about to learn what humans became when their fury was truly awakened. The safe house was barely worthy of the name, located in the lower levels of a mining station in the Kurth system.
Ow.
It consisted of 3 cramped rooms with recycled air that tasted of metal and fear. Caxter sat in the main room with his remaining command staff, all of them showing signs of the brutal week they had just survived. They had managed to rendezvous with 4 of the 7 ships that escaped. New Providence, the other 3 had simply disappeared, and whether they were destroyed or had fled to distant systems, Caxter did not know. His company that had once numbered 500 strong now consisted of 73 survivors. Thork paced back and forth, his massive frame making the small room feel even more confined. We should split up, the Vraxian growled. Scatter to different sectors and disappear until this blows over. It will not blow over. Caxter said quietly. He had spent the last 3 days reading everything he could find about human history and human warfare and human cultural concepts. Of justice and revenge, what he learned had stolen his sleep and replaced his arrogance with cold terror. Seeks looked up from her datapad with 3 of her 4 eyes. Commander, I have been monitoring galactic news networks, and there is nothing about the New Providence incident and no mention of human retaliation, and maybe they are letting it. Caxter barked a harsh laugh that held no humor. They are not letting it go, and they are being quiet because they do not want us to know what they are planning. He pulled up a holographic display showing historical Earth conflicts. Look at this. And the humans spent thousands of years fighting each other before they even reached space, and they have refined warfare into an art form that makes our species look like children playing with sticks. The display showed images from human wars and battles that had consumed entire continents and weapons that could end. Civilizations and conflicts that lasted generations. They have a concept called proportional response. Caxter continued, his voice heavy, when someone attacks them in a limited way. They respond in a limited way, and they follow rules, and they show mercy, and they negotiate. Thork stopped pacing, so maybe they will negotiate with us. No, Thor said flatly, because we did not attack them in a limited way. And we did not follow the rules of engagement, and we attacked their civilians. He changed the display to show different historical events. When you threaten human civilians, especially their children, they have a different response, and they call it total war. And when humans commit to total war, they do not stop until their enemy is completely destroyed. The room fell silent, except for the hum of failing ventilation system Skelix, who had been monitoring communications from a corner terminal. Suddenly stiffened, "Commander, we have a problem? Another one?" Thork asked bitterly. The Velkin Consortium just released a statement. Kellic said, reading from his screen. They claim that Talon's Strike Mercenary Company attacked New Providence without their knowledge or approval, and they are calling it an act of piracy, and they have frozen all our accounts and declared our contract void. Caxter closed his eyes. He had expected this, but it still felt like a blade between his ribs. They are cutting us loose and leaving us to face human justice alone. Those cowards hired us, Thork roared, smashing one fist into the wall and leaving a sizable dent, and now they are protected while we are hunted, Caxter said. This is what they planned from the beginning, and use mercenaries to test human resolve, and if it works, claim victory, and if it fails, disavow everything. Six's skin had turned pale green with stress. What do we do? Before Caxter could answer, proximity alarms began, while Kelix's claws flew across his console. Contacts approaching the station and reading as human vessels, and they are not military ships, and they are intelligence service. How did they find us this quickly? Thork Demondead Caxter felt a chill run down his spine. Because they are better at this than we are, and because they have been doing this to each other for millennia. He stood and began issuing rapid orders. Everyone grab what you can carry, and we leave now and split into 3 groups and take different routes off this station. The room exploded into frantic activity as mercenaries grabbed weapons and supplies and personal effects. Caxter took only his personal data core and a sidearm. They fled through the lower maintenance tunnels of the station, and the metallic corridors echoing with their rushed footsteps behind them. Caxter could hear the distinctive sound of breaching charges. The humans were not bothering with subtlety. His group of 25 mercenaries made it to a docking bay, where they had a small transport vessel waiting A's. They rushed up the boarding ramp. Caxter looked back and saw a figure standing in the entrance to the bay. It was a human, not in military armor, but in a simple, dark suit mail. Average height, unremarkable features except for his eyes. Those eyes held the same cold certainty that the naval officers had held. The human did not draw a weapon or call for backup. He just looked at Caxter with an expression of profound disappointment. "You came to our home?" the human said, his voice carrying clearly across the docking bay despite the distance. "You threatened our families, and what did you think would happen?" Caxter wanted to respond, but words failed him. There was something about the human's calm demeanor that was more terrifying than any battle rage. The human continued speaking. "Every one of you will be found, and you will face justice for what you have done. And you can run to the edge of the galaxy, and we will still find you, and this is not a threat, and this is a promise." Then the human turned and walked away, not running, not calling for reinforcements, just walking away as if Caxter's escape was irrelevant to the final outcome. "Commander, we need to go," Thork shouted from inside the ship. Cax. Thort stumbled up the ramp, and the doors hissed shut behind him. The transport launched moments later, and escaping the station just as human ships began locking down all other exits as they jumped away to yet another system. Caxter accessed the galactic information networks on a secured channel. What he found made his blood freeze. 3 members of his company had been captured on a trading station in the Ven Sector. 2 more had been found on a pleasure world in neutral Spassen. Other 5 had been intercepted trying to book passage on a long-range transport. The humans were not just hunting him. They were hunting everyone who had participated in the attack on New Providence, methodically and systematically, and with resources that seemed unlimited over the next 2 weeks. Caxter watched his company dissolve. Some were captured, some died fighting rather than surrender. A few simply disappeared, and whether they had found hiding places the humans could not reach or had been killed quietly, he did not know. His own group dwindled as paranoia and fear drove wedges between former comrades. Thork, left with 10 others and claiming he had a safe contact in the outer rim. Seeks took 8 more, and heading for a smuggler's haven she swore was untouchably. Tuxter was left, with only 15 loyal followers and all of them showing the strain of constant flight. They moved from system to system, and never staying more than 2 days in any location, and always watching for human operatives. But the humans were patient. Caxter began to understand that humans did not think in terms of days or weeks. They thought in terms of months and years, and even generations when it came to matters of justice. He found records of human conflicts where they had pursued enemy commanders for decades after wars ended, found stories of human intelligence services that had tracked down war criminals 50 years after their crimes. Then humans did not forget, they did not forgive, and they never ever stopped. On the 23rd day after the New Providence incident, Caxter received a message on an encrypted channel. He thought only 3 people knew about the message. Was simple. It was a list of names. Mercenary, who had participated in the attack. Next to each name was a status: captured, deceased, or at large. Caxter's name was marked at large below. The list was a single sentence: surrender now and face trial, run forever and face execution. There was no signature, but Caxter knew who had sent it. The humans were giving him a choice, the same choice they gave to all their enemies: justice or death. As he stared at the message, Caxter finally understood the full magnitude of his mistake. He had not just attacked a colony, he had not just broken a treaty, he had attacked the one thing that humans valued above all else: their families, and for that crime there would be no escape. The only question was whether he would surrender with some shred of dignity intact, or whether they would run him down like an animal. Caxter looked at his remaining followers and saw the same realization dawning in their eyes. They were not mercenaries anymore. They were prey, and the most patient, most relentless hunters in the galaxy were coming for them. The freighter that Caxter and his remaining 12 followers stowed away on was called the Drifting Fortune, and it was heading to the far edges of known space where even human reach might not extend. Or so Caxter desperately hoped. He had spent the last 37 days running, and each day brought news of more captures and more deaths. Thork and his group had been cornered on a mining colony in the outer rim. The Vroxian had chosen to fight. Human special forces had obliged him. There were no survivors from Thork's group. Seeks had managed to reach her smuggler's haven, and had even sent Caxter a message claiming she was safe. 3 days later, she was in human custody. The smugglers had sold her out without hesitation when human intelligence officers arrived with evidence of the New Providence. Caxter sat in the dark cargo hold of the freighter and surrounded by crates of mining equipment, and wondered how much longer he could keep running. His cybernetic eye had begun malfunctioning from lack of proper maintenance. 2 of his natural eyes were developing infections from the stress and poor nutrition. He looked and felt like a shadow of the proud mercenary commander he had been just 5 weeks ago. One of his remaining followers, a young Corvin named Drix, approached cautiously. Commander, we are approaching the jump point to the Theta Expanse, RX said quietly. Once we are there, even human intelligence will have trouble tracking us. Caxter wanted to believe that the Theta Expanse was a lawless region filled with pirates and smugglers and criminal cartels. It was also incredibly dangerous, and most legitimate governments avoided it entirely. Maybe, Caxter said without conviction. He had learned too much about human persistence to feel truly safe anywhere. His datapad chimed with an incoming message on yet another encrypted channel. Caxter almost did not open it. Every message lately brought bad news, but command habits died hard, and he activated the screen. It was a video message. The image showed a human woman in a simple gray uniform. She was middle-aged with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a practical style. Commander Caxter, she said in Galactic Standard with only a slight human accent, My name is Director Sarah Chen of Earth Alliance Intelligence. Caxter felt ice flood his veins. I wanted to speak with you directly rather than continue this pursuit indefinitely. Director Chen continued, You have been running for 39 days now, and in that time, we have apprehended or neutralized 61 members of your company. She consulted a datapad off-screen. You currently have 12 individuals with you. And we know their names and their species and their skills, and we know you are aboard the freighter Drifting Fortune heading for the Theta Expanse. Caxter looked around the cargo hold with growing panic. How could they possibly know that? Director seemed to read his thoughts. You are wondering how we found you, and the answer is simple. We are very good at finding people, and we have been doing this for a very long time. She leaned forward slightly, but I am not contacting you to gloat, and I am contacting you because I believe you are different from some of your former subordinates. Different how? Caxter whispered, even though it was a recording. You have not killed any civilians since the initial attack, and you have not taken hostages, and you have not committed further violence even when cornered, Director Chen said. This suggests to me that you understand the gravity of your mistakes. She paused. The individuals who chose to fight rather than surrender are dead, and the individuals who committed additional crimes during their flight have been neutralized with extreme prejudice, but those who surrendered peacefully are alive and facing trial. The director's expression became even more serious. I am authorized to make you an offer one final time and surrender yourself and your remaining followers to human authorities, and you will receive fair trials under interstellar law, and if you provide testimony regarding the Velkin Consortium's role in this incident, your sentences will be reduced accordingly, and if I refuse, Caxter asked the recording as if she had anticipated the question. Director Chen continued, If you refuse, we will continue to pursue you, and we will pursue you across every system, in every station, in every hidden corner of the galaxy, and we will never stop, and we will never forget, and eventually, we will find you. Her kind eyes somehow became harder without losing their fundamental humanity, and when we do find you, if you are still running, if you have still refused to face justice, then you will not be arrested and you will be eliminated. She stood up. You have 24 standard hours to respond to this message, and after that, the offer expires, and you become a priority target for our tactical response teams. The recording ended. Caxter sat in silence for a long moment around him. His followers had gathered and had heard the entire message. It is a trap. Eric said immediately, They just want us to surrender so they can execute us without a fight, maybe. Caxter said slowly. Or maybe they are telling the truth. He pulled up the files he had compiled on human legal systems. Everything he had read suggested that humans took their justice systems seriously, had trials and evidence and procedures. They were harsh on those who harmed civilians, but they were also fair to those who cooperated, Commander. We are not seriously considering surrender, another follower asked in disbelief. A Droxian named Caxter looked at each of them. They were exhausted and malnourished and terrified most. Were young and had joined his company seeking adventure and fortune. Now they were fugitives, facing a choice between perpetual flight and possible execution. Tell me honestly, Caxter said quietly. How long do you think we can keep running? No one answered. The humans found us on a random freighter heading to the most lawless region of known space, continued. They knew exactly where we were and exactly how many of us there are, and if they wanted to kill us. They could have destroyed this ship from orbit. He gestured at the recording device instead. They are offering us trials and reduced sentences, and a chance to help bring down the Velkins who set us up to fail. Kel shook his head. I did not sign up to spend years in a human prison. No. Caxter agreed. You signed up to be a mercenary, and I led you into a disaster that killed most of our company, and destroyed our reputation, and made us hunted criminals. The truth hung heavy in the recycled air. I have been researching human history, Caxter said, and I found something interesting. He pulled up several historical records. Humans have fought countless wars, and they have had enemies who committed terrible crimes against their people, but when those enemies surrendered, and when they cooperated, and when they showed genuine remorse, the humans showed mercy. They also have records of executing war criminals. RX pointed out, yes. For those who continued to commit atrocities, and for those who refused to acknowledge their crimes, and for those who showed no remorse, Caxter agreed. But we can show remorse because we feel it. He looked at his hands. All 4 of them I made a terrible mistake, and I accepted a contract without proper intelligence, and I led you all into attacking civilians, and nothing can change that. His voice grew firmer. But we can choose how this ends, and we can run until they kill us one by one, and/or we can face justice and try to salvage something from this disaster. The cargo hold was quiet except for the hum of the ship's engines. Finally, a Mithrian named Vex spoke up. If we surrender, will they really give us fair trials? I believe they will, Caxter said, because that is what their legal system demands, and because they document everything, and because the entire galaxy will be watching. He stood up slowly. But I will not order you to surrender, and this is a choice each of you must make over the next 6 hours. Caxter spoke with each of his followers. Individually, some were convinced by his arguments, some were simply too exhausted to keep running to, including RX, chose to take their chances in the Theta Expansa. Caxter did not try to stop them. He gave them what credits he had left and wished them luck in the end. 11 of them, including Caxter, decided to surrender. He sent a response to Director Chen's message. It was simple. We surrender and we will provide full cooperation, and we request fair treatment under interstellar law. Response came within minutes. Your surrender is accepted. Proceed to the coordinates being transmitted now, and a transport will meet you there, and you will be treated in accordance with all relevant legal standards. And Director Chen Caxter rerouted the freighter to the provided coordinates. As they approached the meeting point, he saw 3 human ships waiting, not warships this time, transport vessels with clear markings indicating they were operated by the Earth Alliance. Justice Department. The transfer was professional and efficient human officers in formal uniforms processed. Each surrendering mercenary with careful documentation. They were not gentle, but they were not brutal either. Everything was recorded and witnessed, and legal as Caxter was escorted onto the transport. He found himself face to face with Director Chen herself. She was exactly as she had appeared in the recording. Kind eyes, professional demeanor, absolute certainty. You made the right choice, Commander, she said quietly. Did I? Caxter asked, his voice hoarse. Yes, Director Chen said firmly. Because now you face justice instead of execution, and now you have a chance to help us hold the real criminals accountable. And now you get to live with what you have done instead of dying without ever making amends. Caxter's voice faded to silence in the guild hall on Karis 9 station. Young recruits sat motionless, and their earlier confidence completely evaporated. The Droxian was no longer purple with health, but pale with shock. The Mithrian twins had stopped twitching their antennae. The Corvin's claws were no longer flexing with anticipation, but were clenched tight with tension. You surrendered, the Corvin finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. You actually surrendered to humans, Caxter nodded slowly. I spent 3 years in a human correctional facility, he said, and it was not pleasant, but it was not torture either, and they provided adequate food and medical care and access to legal representation. He gestured with one hand. I testified against the Velkin Consortium and provided evidence of their deliberate deception, and the humans used that testimony to bring charges against 17 Velkin officials. Did the Velkins face justice? One of the Mithrian twins asked. Some did, Caxter replied. 3 were convicted and sentenced to significant prison time, and the consortium itself was fined heavily and lost their trading privileges in human space for 20 years. He took a drink from his glass. The humans made sure. The galaxy knew that hiring mercenaries to attack civilians would result in consequences for everyone involved. The Droxian leaned forward, and the others in your company who surrendered. Most received sentences ranging from 2 to 7 years, depending on their level of involvement, Caxter said. Those who could prove they were following orders and did not commit individual atrocities received lighter sentences. His expression darkened. Those who had killed civilians directly received much harsher punishments, and those who kept running, Corvan scaled Caxter, a cybernetic I-word as it focused. Every single one was eventually found, and those who surrendered when cornered are now in prison, and those who fought died. He let that sink in. It took the humans for years to find the last one, and he had fled to the most remote mining colony in the Andromeda sector, and he thought he was safe. What happened? The Droxian whispered human intelligence officers walked into his dwelling one morning and showed him footage of every member of our company and showed him where each one had ended up, and then they gave him one last chance to surrender. Caxter's voice was flat. He pulled a weapon, and they killed him before he could fire a shot. The guild hall seemed to have grown colder. The humans do not bluff, Caxter continued. When they say they will hunt you to the edge of the galaxy, they mean it literally, and they have the patience and the resources and the absolute determination to follow through. He stood up and walked to the window overlooking the station's main concourse below. Thousands of beings from hundreds of species went about their daily business. Look out there, he said to the recruits. You see Varaxians and Droxians and Methrians and Kelvins and dozens of other species that are physically superior to humans. In various ways, the recruits joined him at the window. Varaxians are stronger, Caxter said, pointing to one of the massive warriors walking below. Droxians are faster, and Methrians have better sensory organs, and Kelvins have natural armor that humans lack. He turned to face them. So why is it that when humans entered the galactic community barely 100 years ago, every major power immediately began treating them as equals or even superiors? No one answered, because physical superiority means nothing when facing an enemy that refuses to quit, Caxter said. Humans are not the biggest or the strongest, or the fastest, but they are the most stubborn and most adaptive and most relentless species any of us has ever encountered. We walked back to the table and sat down heavily. I researched human history extensively during my trial and my imprisonment, and what I learned terrified me far more than any battlefield ever did. The recruits returned to their seats. Drawn by the weight of his words, humans spent thousands of years fighting each other, and they developed warfare into a science, and they created strategies and tactics and technologies specifically designed to defeat other humans. Caxter pulled up a holographic display showing various human conflicts. They fought wars that lasted decades, and they fought in every environment imaginable. They fought with whatever weapons they had available, and when those weapons were not enough, they invented new ones. The display showed human soldiers in environments ranging from frozen tundra to burning deserts. From deep jungles to urban ruins, they learned to fight underwater and in the air and in space and in cyberspace. Caxter continued. They learned to fight with swords and guns and missiles and nuclear weapons and information warfare. He changed the display to show human special operations forces, but more than that. They learned patience, and they learned that sometimes the best way to defeat an enemy is not through direct confrontation, but through persistence and through intelligence gathering and through making the enemy defeat themselves. The Corvins shifted uncomfortably. You make them sound invincible. They are not invincible, Caxter said firmly. Humans die just as easily as any other species, and they make mistakes, and they can be defeated in individual battles. He leaned forward. But here's what you must understand. Humans separate the battle from the war, and losing a battle does not mean they will stop fighting, and it just means they will adapt and learn and come back stronger. They have a saying. He continued, what does not kill me makes me stronger, and for humans, this is not just a saying but a core belief, and every defeat teaches them something, and every setback makes them more determined. One of the Mithrian twins spoke up, but surely they must have limits, and they must have things they will not do. Caxter nodded. Oh yes. They have limits, and they have strong moral codes and rules of engagement and laws of war that they follow strictly. He paused until you threaten their families. The temperature in the booth seemed to drop again. That is the line you must never cross, Caxter said, his voice low and intense. Humans will negotiate over territory, and they will compromise on resources, and they will show mercy too. Defeated enemies, and they will follow all their civilized rules. His 3 natural eyes and his cybernetic eye all focused on the recruits with laser intensity. But if you threaten their children, if you attack their homes, if you target their families, then all those rules disappear. And then you face something that no amount of physical superiority can overcome. You face human fury. He gestured to the window again. You see that human at the bar? The recruits looked and saw a human male in casual clothes. Laughing with a group of mixed-species friends, he looked completely ordinary average height. Average build, nothing remarkable. His name is Marcus Webb, Caxter said. He was a Marine sergeant during the New Providence incident. The recruits looked at the human with new eyes. He was part of the force that liberated the colony and that captured my ground troops and that hunted down those who ran. Caxler's voice carried a strange mixture of respect and fear. I spoke with him after my release, and I needed to understand, and he told me something I will never forget. The old mercenary commander's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. He said, "We do not enjoy war, and we do not seek violence, and we would prefer to live in peace, and that is why we have all our rules, and all our laws, and all our attempts at diplomacy." Caxter paused, then he looked at me with those calm human eyes and said, "But when someone threatens our families, when someone attacks our homes, all that civilization we built, all those rules we follow, that is not weakness, and that is us choosing to be better than our nature." The recruits were completely silent, and when you force us to stop choosing civilization, when you make us revert to our nature, then you discover what we really are. Persistence hunters who can track prey across continents. Pack animals who will sacrifice ourselves for the group. Two losers who can turn anything into a weapon. And above all, a species that does not know how to quit. Caxter finished his drink, that human. Marcus Webb, he could have killed me a dozen times during the hunt, and he chose not to because I had not personally killed any civilians, and because once I surrendered, I became a person to be judged by law rather than an enemy to be destroyed. He looked at each recruit in turn. But make no mistake, if I had killed civilians, if I had taken hostages, if I had harmed children, that same human would have hunted me to the literal ends of the universe, and he would never have stopped, and he would never have forgotten, and eventually he would have found me and ended me. The Draxian's voice was shaky. "So what are you telling us?" "Commander, never take contracts against humans." "No," Caxter said, standing up slowly. "I am telling you that humans are like any other species when it comes to professional conflicts, and they will fight over territory and resources and political disagreements, and they will follow the rules, and they will accept defeat when they are beaten fairly." He gathered his things. "What I am telling you is this. Treat humans with respect and follow the laws of war, and never, ever target their civilians, and if you do those things, they will be honorable opponents and potentially valuable allies." His expression became grave. "But if you cross that line, if you make the mistake I made, if you threaten what they love, then you will discover why humanity survived and thrived on a death world for millions of years.